Well, hello, Philos Catholic family. We're back with the Beyond Rome podcast, and I'm here with Dr. Russ Hittinger and, of course, my co-host James. And we are so excited to have you with us today. To talk about two declaratios: Nostra Aetate, the declaration on our relationship to non-Christian religions, and also Dignitatis Humanae, which is a declaration on religious freedom. And something that we are excited to talk about with you is during the Second Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council released 16 different documents. 4 of them are dogmatic constitutions, and the rest are different kinds of documents. And these 2 in particular that we're going to talk about are declarations. So Russ, first of all, welcome to the Beyond Rome podcast. We're so happy to have you as our guest. All right. A man of intentional words. We just got a thumbs up from Russ. And Russ, you mentioned that you've spent a lot of time talking and thinking about the Second Vatican Council and these documents. So let's just begin by locating these documents. What is the difference between a constitution and a declaration? We'll start there.
Yeah, roughly speaking, but pretty accurately, a constitution is setting forth the theology of the church, based chiefly on revelation, but including other matters as well. And it is meant for the church herself, whereas a declaratio is meant for others outside of the church. And similar to the American Declaration of Independence, it's called a declaratio in the old Latin sense of the term, which is a communication to someone on the outside. In the case of our Declaration of Independence, it was actually to all the nations of the world. Yeah. And a declaratio sets forth one's intentions with regard to others.
Mm-hmm.
The American Declaration of Independence has principles in it, but it is not our Constitution. It is not our internal organization ad intra in Latin, for ourselves. So in the documents of Vatican II, the constitutions are our fundamental theology about various matters.
Right.
Whereas our declarations are much shorter documents, very short documents about our relations to others. They're meant to be short. They're more diplomatic, by the way, without moral reasoning, but they're more diplomatic than they are constitutive of our own body, Christian body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Nostra Aetate is the second shortest declaratio. Dignitatis Humanae is a rather short but slightly longer declaratio.
Mm-hmm.
And these concern our pledges to the rest of mankind. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. That's not to say they don't have important philosophical and theological dimensions. In fact, in our own Declaration of Independence as Americans, there's more philosophy in the Declaration of Independence than there is in the Constitution itself. Okay.
Interesting.
But it's who it's meant for, who we are addressing.
Interesting. And so with the Second Vatican Council, those 4 dogmatic constitutions, so we'll just list them for those who don't know: Lumen Gentium, Gaudium et Spes, Sacrosanctum Concilium, and then what's the 4th one? I'm blanking, of course. I'm blanking on the 4th one because you can never just remember the 4th one. But I think that what I see is a temptation to, first of all, if you are a Catholic, a devout Catholic, you take the Second Vatican Council seriously. It's an ecumenical council, so it's not really an option. This is an important council and legitimate council church. That's the first point. The second point I'd like to make is that while, yes, the dogmatic constitutions, like you said, have to do with speaking to the church herself, and so they have a weight that is weightier, a weight that's weightier than declaratios. That doesn't dismiss the importance of the declarations, even though they're of a different kind. Would you agree with that?
Right. But even among these declarations, you have to make some distinctions.
Okay.
So Nostra Aetate is very brief.
Yep.
Dignitatis is brief, but 3 times longer. At least 3 times longer.
It is, yeah. It is like 7 pages or something.
Yeah.
And Nostra Aetate is like a page and a half, maybe 2.
But they have to be taken seriously, but not independently of the constitutions.
Right. So they refer, so what you're saying is being taken seriously, the legitimacy of these declarations written for those outside the church, or a relationship for those outside the church,
right,
gain their authority by way of reference to revelation or to the dogmatic constitutions of the council.
Exactly. But who you're talking to makes a big difference, right?
That's right. So should we talk? I'd like to get into the documents themselves, but briefly, why were they written? I know that's a huge question, and we'll probably maybe take some time, but and our time's limited. But why were they written?
That's a long story.
That is a long story. No, I did that.
Because in the first session of the Vatican Council, the schemata of documents was profoundly changed. So when the council came back after the first session, they reconfigured, in a way, these documents, or what these documents would become. Nostra Aetate is very important, but I would list its important points also in reference to Gaudium et Spes.
Right.
But very important points, and also important points philosophically, and to some extent theologically. So I would say that Nostra Aetate makes 5 points, even in this small document, but you have to read it for a while to find 5. I will agree. But the first thing is the church's relation to religions ad extra. Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and so forth.
Right.
The first point is about natural law itself. Very important. That is, the fundamental moral order is, and let's go back to St. Thomas Aquinas, Prima Secundae, question 94, article 2, on the first precepts of natural law.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Russ. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
We go back and he says, concerning the inclinations of our rational nature, the first one he mentions is the inclination to know the truth about God. Stop. He doesn't say to know God.
But the inclination, the religious sense, in other words.
In the religious sense, you've got it. This is everywhere. By the way, it's even true of atheists. Not even atheists can escape this.
Right.
They just have a different answer or whatever it is. So it's natural law foundations, which is found in part 1 of Dignitatis Humanae. The second is what I would call anthropological cultural considerations, which is how this has actually been played out in the world's conspicuous religions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we know that with Judaism and Islam, it's clearer
Yeah.
because they believe in a kind of divine revelation, however they do.
Mm-hmm.
But with others, I mean, Polynesians, Japanese, uh,
Hinduism,
yeah,
Buddhism, it's different.
Hinduism should be counted as a higher kind of theology. But so they want to deal with that as well because although it's not biblical or quasi-biblical, it does provide evidence for that inclination to know the truth about God
Mm-hmm.
and to adhere to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the next level would be, I would just call the problem of social and political amity between religions. So how should different religions interact with each other socially and politically? Put aside right now just the theological issues. And that's an important point. I mean, uh, because these religions can be combined in a single polity, sometimes in a single culture.
Right. I mean, they could be various beliefs, but the culture is the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have to deal with international.
Okay.
Yeah, there's international issues,
Right.
like all get out, as we're seeing played out in the Middle East today. I mean,
Yeah.
so I think what they're trying to do in Nostra Aetate is affirm on a natural law basis that human beings want to know the truth about God.
Right.
And they want to adhere to it, whatever that truth may be.
Whatever the conclusion may be.
And then there are deeper anthropological and cultural issues that have to be discussed in terms of diverse religions. By the way, even diversity within a single religion.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much diversity in Christianity. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right.
Not to mention Islam
And yeah, that's true. And Islam and Judaism, actually. Yeah.
and Buddhism.
Oh, I didn't know that, but I'm not as familiar with Buddhism.
And then how they can get along in a single polity, and then how they relate to each other by polities internationally. So, that's a big menu.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big menu. Nostra Aetate touches upon all of them, but chiefly on the natural law and the anthropological cultural issue. Because you might remember that John Paul II early on said the moral demise of Western culture, and I don't think we just have to say Western culture anymore,
Yeah.
is what he called eschatological aloneness.
Mm-hmm.
We believe ourselves to be alone in this multiverse or universe,
Yeah.
and that is the primary challenge to any religion, because religion always means offering ourselves to God.
And binding ourselves to God and to each other.
Binding, exactly, because it's religios, to bind all the time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that is a new issue. Maybe it's a very old issue, but it's especially a new issue that Nostra Aetate doesn't address. And this is one good reason to read Gaudium et Spes, which takes it up in great detail.
Interesting.
Because Wojtyła wrote some of the best passages on this.
In Gaudium et Spes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming he wrote I don't know if it's Gaudium et Spes 22 or 24, but man finds himself in a sincere gift of self. Paraphrase.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're now talking a gift of self to something higher, which is religio, in its full sense of the term. And so Nostra Aetate, and to remind you, because it's a declaratio, it's not going down into everything that was in Gaudium et Spes.
Because it refers to Gaudium et Spes, and you have Gaudium et Spes to deal with the principles by which the practical proposals in Nostra Aetate are grounded in Gaudium et Spes is what you're trying to say.
Right.
Okay.
And so is Dignitatis.
And Dignitatis. Okay.
And Dignitatis. So to recognize a kind of cultural and anthropological universality to religion and to respect it is grounded, first of all, in this document, not in a full theology, but in a full anthropology.
You mean the declaratios have the anthropology part?
Yeah, it's an anthropology. You can't understand the truth about human beings without taking account and respect of this. So let me revert quickly over to Dignitatis.
Yeah.
It was the most controversial document of Vatican II, even before it was issued, for this reason.
More than Nostra Aetate?
Oh,
wow.
Much more.
Really? Well, that's fascinating.
It had the most corrections from the council floor of any document.
Wow.
Wow, Russ.
Here, I'm not going to solve the whole issue, but here's one of the reasons. Are we trying to explain theologically our point of view in terms of revealed theology, or are we trying to explain our anthropological political reasons? And by the way, the original draft put the church's position first, which became part 2 of Dignitatis, and then the implications for constitutional rights, moral rights. They reversed it at the end, and they had some good reason for doing so.
Because the beginning of Dignitatis Humanae is very anthropological, like the right to religious freedom, grounded in man's social nature. And I mean, it's very...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, his religious nature, too.
His religious nature, or he has a responsibility, to moral obligation, particularly a responsibility towards religious, searching.
So in Gaudium et Spes, there's a much better explanation of it. But to quote a line, we must protect the sign of the transcendental nature and dimension of the human being. Human beings are naturally religious.
Yes.
And so Dignitatis asserts that. Remember, it's a declaratio. It's not a constitution. You've got to read Gaudium et Spes. But it asserts that and says certain things follow from the transcendental, that's not a good term, transcendent spirit of a human being, which is to know first truth. This is Aristotle 101.
Yeah.
Aristotle. It's Plato 101. It's Marcus Aurelius 101. For heaven's sakes.
For heaven's sakes.
Yeah. And so, for those reasons, there have to be some limits on political legal rule, to respect that. Now, Dignitatis goes into all of the exceptions to it, which is if one is truly and directly harming natural goods. By the way, including the transcendental orientation of the humanum.
Mm-hmm.
But, doing things that are violative of other kinds of moral order or political order. But part one of Dignitatis is defending what I would call what Nostra Aetate assumes to be the natural law and anthropological-cultural order of this issue. And also the social and political amity that fundamental moral principles of respecting human conscience on these matters are basic for understanding how you distinguish what we might regard as misbehavior from crime.
Mm-hmm.
So we may believe that people who just wave incense sticks at wild animals is mistaken. But
But we're not gonna criminalize a religious practice that isn't. Yeah, right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's also part of the natural order of things, besides being religious, to be political. And to be political is to live in a complex order of society beyond our second cousins and be capable of having some amity for strictly political goods. Chief of which is justice. We don't want our first cousins adjudicating disputes.
Mm.
Well, unless you go to Newark. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I just want to take a quick tangent and connect the dots. Like, why are we talking about Dignitatis Humanae and Nostra Aetate on the Beyond Rome podcast? Well, because the mission of Philos, or at least the tagline that we put out there, there's a million different ways to talk about this mission, is positive Christian engagement in the Near East, right? And for this podcast, this conversation of connecting ourselves with our Hebraic roots, our Jewish roots, and our roots in the Near East and other Christian minorities and the Orthodox and Eastern Catholics. And so if we're going to be in relationship with our Jewish brothers and sisters, or in relationship with, most people in the Near East are Muslim, if we're going to engage with our roots, our Christian roots in the Near East, these are kind of crucial. These are crucial documents, declaratios, to look at, and like you're explaining to us, Russ, they're grounded in a deeper philosophy and theology that the church does teach, and that has been unpacked in these dogmatic constitutions. So I just wanted to take that time to kind of connect those dots in case someone's wondering why we're actually talking about this, because this is a modern council for modern man in modern times. And so I think I make up, and you can correct me, Russ, that there was so much controversy around Dignitatis Humanae because even the temptation to begin the document with the church's specific proposal and to reverse that to the religious sense or the Aristotelian anthropology is to actually, I think it's a work of the Holy Spirit in this sense, that we're recognizing that in this time, the way we're going to relate to people has to be firstly on a human level before we can even get to supernatural relationship.
Yeah, well, I agree. And by the way, this raises a very tough question, which you may well be more competent to address than yours truly. The state of Israel allows religious liberty.
Yes, that's right. It does.
And it may be in its own funky way, but it does constitutionally.
It does.
And its immediate combatants probably don't.
Yeah.
Okay. They may recognize it as a temporary custom or policy, but not constitutionally, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's one problem over there of trying to settle things, and that, it's well beyond my ken to pronounce on this. But you do know that the second half of uh, Nostra Aetate does address the Jews. There's as much or more attention given to this issue in that very short document as other religions. And it was for this reason that everyone paid attention to it. Because although it's not a confession of fault about certain laws, policies, actions of the older Christendom, it is trying to set things straight.
Yeah.
Because the older Christendom with Jews was different than the older Christendom with Muslims. Now, I'm not supporting either of them. I'm just saying there was a difference. Because Jews were, in many places of the older Christendom, let's say the 9th century onward, they lived in a Christendom. Dom means house, domus. They lived nearby. Whereas Muslims were not really allowed in the city except as diplomats or something. So speaking now as Catholics, with that centuries-old history, Muslims were not easily admitted into Central Europe to live there. They could live in certain parts of Spain that we hadn't conquered yet or something. But whereas Jews lived with us. And so our obligations as Catholics to set the record straight about our Jewish brothers and sisters was more important. And that's why Nostra Aetate was so important, even though I don't even think it's 10 sentences, but 10 very laden and important sentences on this.
Incredibly fascinating. Incredibly. And would you agree with me? It kind of miraculous, I would say. Maybe even both of them.
Well, it had to be done. And the question is how to do it short and sweet. Because how could one, in 10 sentences, clarify the entire record?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I still say to go back to Gaudium et Spes and even the main Constitution on Sacred Scripture and other
Dei Verbum. That's the fourth one. How could I forget that one? My goodness.
And to go back to these things is important. And to always remember that these declarations are short and they're meant ad extra. Now, just like the Declaration of Independence of the fledgling United States, a declaration can import very important things that affect all the rest of us. You know, for the whole 19th century, Americans fought over it. Okay, so declarations can be very important. I just wanted to distinguish the two.
Yes, and I'm so grateful for this podcast. I hope our listeners have their appetites provoked, because we will continue to talk about this. There's so much to unpack with Nostra Aetate in particular, and with these documents. So this was something to wet your whistle. Is that the phrase? Wet your whistle. That's the phrase. Okay.
Yeah, to wet your whistle of the intellect.
Wet your whistle of the intellect. Exactly. So I guess I had a final question that I think well, we'll leave it at that. There's so much. We're going to link up all 4 of the constitutions and these declarations, these declaratios, to the show notes, hoping people read. But I think my last question is, if it's meant ad extra, has it, are people not in the church reading these and taking them seriously?
Well, you bet. So Nostra Aetate was taken very seriously by our Jewish brethren. I think much more seriously than Muslims or,
because really that was like you said, that was the course correction.
Well, that was our history.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
The stuff on our hands.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Russ, before we say goodbye, tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days. I know you're up to a lot, as you always are, but tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
I'm executive director of the Institute for Human Ecology at Catholic University. I'm in the School of Philosophy at the same place. And my new book is coming out in the next few months.
Oh, hooray. Tell us about your new book. We'll also link to that if there's a pre-order.
The new book is entitled On the Dignity of Society, Catholic University Press. Nice. And you'll love the cover, which is from Van Gogh, with Christ celebrating the Eucharist in a Parisian street.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. Well, congratulations. Yeah. And well done on that. And look forward to taking a look at that. Well, thank you so much again. And we look forward to having you back on. If this episode was helpful for you, please consider sharing it with a friend, leaving a rating and review to help us spread the word, and donating at philosproject.org/give with the comment Catholic to support this podcast. To learn more about becoming a Christian leader in the Near East, check out our Pathfinder free online courses, also on our website. Thanks for listening. See you next week.